We going?
Yeah, you're good.
Excellent. So last time we made it all the way to rhetorical analogies. And rhetorical analogies are going to be similar to rhetorical definitions. And in the sense that we're going to want to try to avoid them. First of all, what are rhetorical definitions? Does anybody remember?
Like abortion is baby killing.
What's that?
Abortion is baby killing.
Correct. And what's the problem with that kind of definition?
Bias.
Correct. And essentially a rhetorical definition is when you put a biased explanation into the definition of a term in order to kind of stack your argument at the outset so that you'll win later on down the road. So you stock your definitions with divisive terms that lead the reader toward your conclusion. We'll call that begging the question later on down the road. So we want to avoid rhetorical definitions. We also want to avoid rhetorical analogies. What am I talking about? This is when we compare two things in order to make one look better or worse than it might be. For example, when Governor Rick Perry compares Social Security to a Ponzi scheme, is he trying to make Social Security look good? No, he's trying to make it look bad. And so if you use a rhetorical analogy to explain a concept or a term, and you cast it in this negative light, then one could see that you're engaged in rhetoric to make Social Security, in this case, look bad. Important considerations can be overlooked when you have these analogies. Is the same standard being used? This is an interesting example. Government workers make more than workers in the private sector. Now, this claim has often been used to argue that we ought to allow private businesses to handle various tasks because they can do it more efficiently. The government is going to hire somebody with a higher salary, and they're going to have 3 of them sitting around the shovel, and we're going to waste this money if the government does it. However, we need to make sure that the same standard of comparison is being used. And many will point out that, does this consider the education level of the worker? Because generally in the government, you're going to have a higher education level for the workers. And many would argue that that would justifiably give them the ability to earn a higher salary. So that is not considered in that particular analogy. And often that is the case. When you have rhetorical analogies, they'll overlook important considerations in order to slant the discussion toward their conclusion. Are the items comparable? Why would it be questionable to compare Willie Mays with Barry Bonds? One guy juiced, the other guy didn't, yeah.
That and like the era they played in.
Yeah. But chief among the things about the era is that they now use these drugs that can enhance your strength, and they didn't when Willie Mays was hitting home runs way back when. So many would question whether this kind of analogy is appropriate either. What about steroids? So we want to avoid rhetorical analogies. Another, you need to be important. When I judge the test scores, the average is different from the median, and the median is different from the mode, and so there are different kinds of comparisons that we can make here. You need to be careful what you're really looking at. Big picture is that we want to avoid rhetorical analogies. They're like rhetorical definitions. It's trying to win an argument on the cheap by begging the question. You probably remember the Terry Schiavo case. Anybody remember that case?
Yeah.
A woman, unfortunately, I don't know how she got into that condition. Does anybody remember what happened to her?
Was it a car accident?
I don't know for sure.
I don't recall what.
So severely brain damaged, and many question whether she's ever going to have consciousness. But yet, you'll see pictures that seem to show she recognizes members of her family and seem to show that she's experiencing perhaps human emotion. However, after the fact, when she dies, they do an autopsy and they find that there is no brain there other than the basic components needed to handle respiration and heartbeat. In other words, the part of the brain that's responsible for conscious thought wasn't even present.
Where did it go?
Excuse me?
How did she? You mean did she have an accident or what?
After she died, they did an autopsy.
Oh, I mean, like what was the cause of her condition?
That's the first question I don't really know. I don't remember what led her to that state.
Was she ever like a normal person?
I don't know for sure.
Yeah, she was.
She
Was
was.
she?
Yeah,
She
she
was
was.
married.
She was married. How did she get into that state?
I don't recall
Was
it.
it a car accident or something?
Maybe, but I don't.
So,
Yes, my question is, even if you have a car accident, I mean, how can that part of your brain be missing and there's no?
It's not that it's physically missing. It's dead. It doesn't work.
Oh, okay.
But we were saying it was physically.
well, true, but they can degenerate, you know, when the brain lives and grows, you know, or it fails to.
Can we look it up really quick?
It's-
Another time.
Do it after class, because it's really marginal to the point. What are we trying to look at with the point? Well, this picture,
She had cardiac arrest and massive brain damage due to lack of oxygen.
a heart attack. So as a result of a heart attack, she got into that state. So what you're talking about is somebody who was normal, conscious, has a family, loving relationships, then boom, heart attack, and she's in this comatose state. And it's understandable that you would look to this person for that same personality, those same relationships. And many family members felt that they saw her there. And many argued that she should be kept alive for that result. There was even a senator in Congress at the time who was a doctor, and I forget his name, but he actually argued that she should be kept alive. But then, after she died, they did an autopsy of the brain, and I thought it was mostly gone, but maybe it was just dead, and there was no conscious activity in the brain. So anybody who was suggesting that she was having human emotions, that she was making some kind of human connection, was, misunderstanding the situation. She really didn't have that conscious part of the brain active. Yeah.
It was her husband who wanted to pull the plug.
I'm not sure.
I believe it was the husband. Husband said that she didn't want to be in a vegetative state. That she had expressed this before, and he wanted to have her unplugged in the family fighting for it. That's the hence the controversy.
That sounds like a lovely situation.
The husband wanted to end the situation, and the family members want to keep her alive.
I wonder what Christmas is like these days. Well, the big point here is that pictures can often deceive. Is she right now recognizing her mother for all we know? This picture could suggest that she is. A picture like this could be used to argue that she should be kept alive. And if we allowed the picture to work, one could argue that we're doing a disservice. We're allowing a picture to confuse the situation. It's been done before. For example, look at this picture here. Is that John Kerry and Jane Fonda at an anti-war rally together? This is big because Jane Fonda during the Vietnam War was famous for speaking out against the war, and she actually went to North Vietnam and visited with the enemy and sat on ballistic missile launchers while our soldiers were fighting and dying. A lot of people were really pissed off about that. A lot of people still have a memory about that. And Jane Fonda actually gave a few lectures, years ago, trying to make up for what she did during the Vietnam War. Now, when John Kerry's running for president in 2004, tying him to Jane Fonda might be a good idea if you want him to lose. So how do we tie him to Jane Fonda?
Doctor, the
We take one picture of John Kerry giving a speech, and then we take another picture of Jane Fonda giving a different speech, and we Photoshop. We put them together. And, people got away with that crap. And I wish I had the newspaper name that did that, because you need to remember people who do that.
called her Hanoi Jane.
Yeah, Hanoi Jane. Think about that. To get this guy not elected president, somebody lied, and they put these photos together to make him look bad. And there was a lot of other stuff going on too during this time. Have you heard about the Smithbow team that made Kerry look bad? He actually won a Medal of Honor for his service in Vietnam.
And a
the-
Purple Heart too.
The conservative enemies got a bunch of soldiers to say that he didn't deserve it. And, particularly when he's running against the guy who used his father's political connections to avoid going to war in the first place. This guy actually went, he wins a Medal of Honor, and they make him look bad. So what do they call those people who are for the war but use their connections to get out of actually fighting at all? Chicken hawks, I think they call them. Well, this is what pictures can do. They can be used to deceive, and they can be used as a form of rhetoric to get you to accept one side of the picture or another. Yes, sir.
Him and Bush were both Skull and Bones members.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Interesting. I wonder how many times that's the case where both candidates
Yeah.
are actually members of
Whenever they were like asked about it, they like freeze up and like both of them said we can't talk about it. Like okay, I'm like, how can you not talk about a pretty vital part of your life and the sculpting of your being here?
Yeah.
And both of them, we can't talk about it.
we should answer, well, we'd like to vote for you, but if you can't talk about it, sorry.
Yeah.
What is Skull and Bones?
It's
a
this private
secret
club,
society.
secret society.
In Yale, it's like you gotta do all kinds of weird satanic witchcraft stuff to get in, and like it's like forever secretive, and anyone who like enters it is like running the world, ends up running the world in some way, like either through banking or politics or.
Skull and Bones. Mysterious. Any questions with persuasion through the use of visual images? Anybody got a better example than this? Caleb?
Well, it seems like the rhetoric is more important than active duty, which is supposed to be this huge prerequisite for becoming president. I think they talked John McCain up as a hero, and in this case was the opposite. There was like an in-depth military report that he had snitched on his fellow soldiers in the prisoner POW camp.
I don't know if we can hold that against him, Caleb.
Well, he was under duress.
With a capital D.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But he was charged with dishonorable conduct.
6 years in solitary confinement. I think many will argue that there is a real limit to what we can expect from our soldiers. I wouldn't fault him for that. There are so many other things to fault him for.
At least he's against torture.
Absolutely. Well, he hadn't really been speaking all that out much against it. And he would be one who could speak with credibility, knowing of what he speaks. When we torture other people's soldiers, that creates an excuse for other people to torture ours. And he actually went through it. So when we're waterboarding other enemy combatants, he's thinking about how our soldiers are going to be treated when they're taken hostage, having gone through it himself. So he does speak with credibility on this issue. Now, I've mentioned before that the authors of our book have grown concerned about what's going on cable news, on talk radio. They see a lot of forms of pseudo-reasoning going on. That's rhetoric that is dressed up like an argument. And it's a fallacy, an error in reasoning. And it's particularly prominent on cable TV and radio. And Rush Limbaugh is a particular star here, although Mike Malloy offers a progressive or liberal version of a talk radio show. However, it is interesting that talk radio seems to do much better for conservatives, and cable comedy shows seem to go much better for liberals and progressives. It doesn't seem like conservatism lends itself to humor, and it doesn't seem like progressivism lends itself to talk radio for some reason. Yes, sir.
I think age is a big part of that too, because I don't think many young people listen to the radio that often, at least, especially talk
Yeah,
radio.
old people just send their Buicks and have a Sirius radio on.
You might have your finger on it. Yeah, younger people like The Daily Show and Colbert Report. Older folks like listening to their radio, perhaps.
Yeah. I went to a dealership and the cars I got, like the older like Buicks and Cadillacs and stuff, like either like Rush Limbaugh would always be on when I would turn it on, or like some classical music.
Rush Limbaugh and classical music. The two just go together, man. Don't they?
The classic people.
Interesting.
You know, and Rush Limbaugh's a classy guy.
Absolutely. That's what I think of when I listen to Rush. Class. Actually, the authors of our text name one fallacy after Rush, the argument from anger, because he engages in it so much. But it's on both sides of the political fence, and you have more news coming out that's coming from a perspective, and you can recognize that perspective. In fact, before we go on to talk about this next chapter, let's talk about the homework assignment. A number of you sent some in, which I can pull up here. Carson had something.
I saw Bill O'Reilly in New York.
You did?
Yeah, I walked around. He's tall.
Tall dude.
He's like 6'5". Or
Yeah.
6'4". I don't know. He's tall.
Did you talk politics with him?
No, I just saw him far away. Like that's Bill O'Reilly.
Is Carson here?
Yeah.
Hey, I like this stuff. Very good to have pictures in with it. Now, let's remind ourselves what was the assignment to do. Do you remember what you were asked?
For the ad one, it was like pick 5 ads and like just tell what they're trying to promise the reader and if the promise is going to be fulfilled.
I got you. What are we promising the reader? And what is the likelihood that it'll fulfill that promise? You went old school here. Got a Coca-Cola ad from the 50s. And look at this. They're promising that it feed your younger children Coca-Cola.
Is that back when they had Coke in it?
I was just asking. At one point it had cocaine in it,
Yeah.
small amounts. And so here we're encouraging our kids to get hooked on Coke. The ad gives off the vibe that Coca-Cola is good for your child and has health benefits. Particularly interesting relative to where we are now, where we have kids by junior high who are struggling with obesity, diabetes. This does not help. Processed sugar is part of the problem. You have the sugar that gets into your system, and that causes, your sugar level goes up, but then it goes way down, and then it comes back up and throws you off whack. When you eat natural foods that have sugar that's not processed, it takes longer for your body to digest it, and rather than your body going like this, the sugar level stays the same. And, you know, we have kids that are fighting, you know, diabetes at record levels. If an ad went out like this now, you could argue that it is a form of child abuse.
Yes.
And many, for example, in higher institutions of higher learning, are wondering, why would we have a Coke machine on campus? Aren't we kind of encouraging our students to harm their health? And why don't we have, instead of, what kind of food options do they have in the machines around this campus?
Candy and chips.
John?
Yeah, they have like
They've got a new machine in the library that's like supposed to be all good for you. It's like, you know, sun chips and granola bars and you know, Fig Newton type snacks, but then everything is like $3, $3.50 or something. It's like
It costs more.
twice as expensive. Of course, you're gonna buy chocolate bars. And
Where is that
it's in the basement of the library near the math center.
basement of the library?
to do it like the office and Dwight takes fresh fruit, stuffs it in the
What's that?
Dwight takes fresh fruit in the office. He takes like fresh fruit and puts it in the vending machine. It's like no packaging, it's like oranges and grapes and stuff. It's funny.
Well, that's what
The
they're
office?
trying to do. They're,
The one where he puts fruit in the vending machine.
we're trying to provide healthier, excuse me guys, snack options, particularly for students. And the reasoning is twofold. You know, first, we want to make money off of this stuff. But second, whatever's on a campus is part of the educational experience. And you could argue that we educate students as soon as they walk on the campus. And putting on healthy food choices around the campus would be one aspect of that. Somebody had, yes, sir, Carson.
I'm pretty sure in Japan they have vending machines of freshly made food, but they have chefs behind them. Just slide the food right in, so you just bring your money, open the door, take your food.
They also have beer and vending machines, which is great.
Chefs right behind the vending machine.
Yeah, they have the kitchen just all the way behind them, and they just slide it right in.
You know, I haven't looked behind all of our vending machines. I'm pretty sure there's not a chef back there.
Okay,
Well, I
is
was just gonna
everything
say that the problem is that, for example, the Pepsi or the Mountain Dew or Coke, you gotta understand that the incentive the college gets from it is maybe sometimes that's how they think, because it's maybe sometimes higher than having, like, for example, I'll just give a Whole Food vending machine, because that Pepsi is gonna pay, I don't know, that amount of money, which is high, bigger than what those people that make a more maybe healthier meals and pay. You know, just think about it. I mean, in almost all colleges that I've been to, in the cafeteria or the food court, it's more big franchise like McDonald's, Sears, and that's what you see. You don't see a lot of Subway or any other chain that are more, you know, healthier.
Well, here's, one could argue that we need to take a long-term approach on this. And from the perspective of the college, we could look at is the money that we devote right now to health insurance for employees, and how much of it could be reduced if we encourage the employees on this campus to eat healthy food choices while they were here. If we encourage the employees here to drink Coca-Cola, eat processed food, blah, 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 that increases the probability that more people here will have diabetes, more people here will have other health complications. They'll have to go to the health insurance to cover that. So you could justify a focus on health in terms of lowering long-term health care costs. But I grant you that's a difficult argument to make in many cases. And it looks like we're losing right now on campus. Okay.
It seems that soda companies, I mean, I don't know who makes Mountain Dew, but
It's Pepsi.
well, they target low-income areas. Like they're flooding Appalachia with Mountain Dew, and it's the poorest part of the country. So there's a major problem. It's a pandemic problem of tooth loss in children and adults, because people can't afford like the milk or juice or like, you know, or often like even like good water.
So they end up drinking Mountain Dew.
Mountain Dew. Everyone from a young age just like feed them Mountain Dew, and you know.
And I tell you,
They
Load
make
up
it
on
so you
salt
can't,
and
you
salt
can't
and
buy
sugar.
those with food stamps. You can't get pop with food stamps anymore.
That's good. That's probably one of the ways in which they're trying to address it. But I tell you, once you begin to repeat this kind of things daily, and I'm just gonna have a little Mountain Dew today, but if you have it every day, then it literally puts on pounds and does all kinds of damage to your ability to balance your sugar. And so shifting away from drinking some kind of pop on a regular basis is maybe one of the keys to having a healthy life. You really need to get away from that. And I can understand how they would focus on low-income areas. I think they probably feel that those people are less likely to make healthy food choices. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, about choice. It's about choice. Because even milk, Mamdu doesn't cost less than milk. You can have a box of milk cheaper than Mamdu. And if these vendors are educated also, and consumers are educated also, they can make, vendors can sell good stuff, and consumers can get good stuff.
Yep.
I prefer to take milk than to take
Right.
Mamdu.
Correct.
But if the choice I have there is just Mamdu,
Yep.
I cannot buy.
And the unfortunate thing is that in many poorer areas of towns, we run into what they call food deserts. And these are areas where there are really no healthy food options. There'll be some portions of the city where the closest place to get food is a Pickwick, or some little small market that only has processed food, doesn't have healthy food choices. And so there might be healthy food choices available, but they're 15 miles down the road. What is close is the Mountain Dew and the Twinkies. And obviously that gets people going down the wrong road. And right now, many areas are trying to fight food deserts by providing organic food choices one way or another in areas that are generally considered to be a food desert. And the federal government will actually encourage this kind of change where you bring healthy food choices. This is what Michelle Obama has been focused on for a number of years. Greer.
It's like Target now has a produce and an organic section.
Target.
and CVS even has,
Even
that-
Walmart, I
Walmart,
heard, is
yeah.
going to go a little green here. So there's really a collective move in the market. And, that's a really good thing when Target and Walmart begin to do it. I know they're big box stores and there's a lot of problems associated with that. But they buy so many products from people in the market that when a Target or a Walmart says, hey, we're going organic, well, that means that it puts the pressure on all the providers out there to provide more organic options. So it really is a sign of a good thing. And also, it's a sign that we have a problem. It's a sign that the processed, forgive my German, crap that you get in the supermarket is actually making us unhealthy, and that we need to move to organic food choices. Yes, ma'am?
On Sunday, I was in Virginia, and I went to get some coffee, and it was a Starbucks, and they had a drive-through.
Starbucks drive-through. That's a new development.
Yeah.
In West Virginia, they got a drive-through Subway.
What's that?
In West Virginia, they got a drive-through Subway.
I haven't seen one of those either. That would not, they can't do it fast enough.
They're big on the drive-through Starbucks in California.
I guess if you place your order over here and then wait in line, finally get around, I think they could probably do it in the subway. Yes, ma'am.
In Ohio, they have drive-through beer stores.
Yeah,
Brew
Cheers.
Beer stores, yeah, drive-through beer stores.
Now that could be an issue. That could be you're driving and you're getting a case.
You gotta pick it up somehow. It's
Yeah.
convenient.
There is a lot of cranberry juice out there. Just give us some cranberry juice or grape juice, some milk.
Well, the concern is that you're buying beer while you're driving the car. That's a bad thing.
Is it in a container or in?
No,
is
like
it
you get
open?
cases. It's not
No.
like you
It's,
get
yeah,
5 beer
cases
drinks or
or
something like
whatever.
that.
They used to have that back in the past. I remember. Are there any commercials that you want to talk about in particular on here?
There's another Pepsi one, I think, right there. But,
What the heck? This advertisement is trying to convey the point that drinking Diet Pepsi, you'll be beautiful doing it.
It's just kind of like glamorizing Pepsi. It's something every Pepsi and Coke commercial was like that pretty much, but
I'll give you-
And here the idea is that if you drink diet as opposed to the regular Pepsi, you're cutting down on some of the sugar. And
Diet soda is poison. It has aspartame in it.
yeah, that can make you go blind or something.
Yeah, it gives you like strokes, cancer.
that's why you're beautiful, you just can't see as well. I look beautiful, absolutely. How about this FedEx one? I like this.
I mean, FedEx is pretty reliable though. About that. I just thought
But it's like, it's so fast, it's like handing it to the people yourself. Yeah. Now, the other homework assignment was to look at Fox and another political news cable channel and compare the two on the basis the news stories covered, the amount of airtime given to 2 or 3 major stories, and any difference in the slant of the presentation of a controversial story. Did anybody get into this and see the differences between some of the cable news channels? Did? What'd you see?
Well, I watched Fox and CNN and like
Fox and CNN.
I watched it at like noon, so like they start the stories over kind of.
Uh-huh. What was the story of the day?
Well, it was some guy shot up a quarry in California. It was like I guess a week ago. Like he killed like a handful of people at his old job, and like the police were like looking for it. It was like in Sunnyvale, California or something. So like those started with that for like 5 minutes, and then Fox immediately went into like campaign and like the economy in Greece and then CNN went to like these stories about like a race car driver pulling another driver from like burning flames and the whole Wall Street protests and all that. Well, Fox pretty much for the entire time covered like the campaign and Rick Perry and all that.
Now, right off the bat, I see a difference.
Yeah.
You mentioned that Fox covered the stories in Greece,
Yeah.
and that Fox didn't cover as much the
Like,
Wall Street
yeah.
occupation.
Well, that and like CNN did like throughout the like I watched it for like an hour somehow and
And you lived, thank goodness you made it through.
but like throughout the hour, CNN pretty much like they covered like the campaign races a little bit, but like for the most part they did more like humanitarian like stuff that's like it's like whatever like race car driver like it's cool and all, but it's like and Fox was like Rick Perry like they were showing. The other thing was they slant like it was funny because at one point they showed Rick Perry like how the population or how popular he was compared to like Obama.
This is Fox?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it showed like they were pretty much like neck and neck according to that poll. And then like I switched to CNN and 5 minutes later they showed like a poll where Rick Perry was like slipping in like how popular he was. So just that slant right there.
And both can be true, they're just picking
So,
different
yeah.
things to talk about.
Yeah.
Thumb?
When I got on CNN for my phone yesterday, so I checked it with my phone. Like the first 3 headlines were like all like bloodshed in the Middle East, like in Syria, like it was in Syria a bunch of women were protesting and like I don't know who it was, the opposition of the party were just like throwing like a bunch of rocks at them, like 9 women like dead, and like head wounds to like rocks to the head.
Wow.
Yeah, and then in Egypt there was some stuff, and I think this morning or last night, 8 Israelis were killed, and in Yemen there were some like everyone in the Middle East pretty much.
A lot going on. But now what we're trying to look at in terms of this question are the differences in the coverage between different news channels. And just in the description that you provided, you mentioned that Fox was focused more on the financial problems in Greece, and CNN took some time to talk about the Wall Street occupation, where Fox didn't. Well, that does play into the political narratives that both networks are developing. In terms of Fox, why are they talking about Greece and the financial problems in Greece?
I'm not that sure, but like it affects everyone.
Well, that, but also they think that's going to happen to us if we don't cut our deficit.
They said Greece too socialist, and that was their demise and stuff.
And every time you hear conservatives complain about the deficit, they say, well, look what's happening in Europe. So you could see Fox developing that part of the argument by covering what's going on there. But now, when it comes to the occupation at Wall Street, Fox is going to take a different tack there. And a lot of people have talked about the difference between Fox's handling of the Tea Party protests and the Fox's lack of handling or different handling of the Wall Street occupation. And certainly conservatives are going to view the two differently. Yes, sir.
I watched not Fox News, but Fox Business, like the Fox Business Channel.
Fox
or
Business
YouTube.
Channel.
And I watched also CNN. They were covering the NBA locale. And it was interesting how like in Fox they were, the way they put the thing is there's a bunch of millionaires, like the players. They put the players that are just want more and more salaries, and these people are just disconnected from like the average American. And CNN, they were trying to explain how it's the players, the owners, and the league, and how some teams are losing teams and stuff like that. And at one point, with the Fox thing, the guy was like talking to, he was naming some players. And he's like, "Who are these guys? Where are they from? And why are they just dressed like trying to, rip more and more millions? Why are we paying like $70 to go watch these people and give them a game money?" And in CNN, they were more trying to be like, "Oh, sports in general cannot just go like 10 more years with like just spending in more." And it was just crazy how like the two sides were just
Very different.
very different.
At Fox, you have the focus on the players being the problem, whereas at CNN, you're getting more of a comprehensive picture.
Because of course the owners, everybody knows the owners are most of them are just billionaires that are just stakeholders in the biggest companies and all that stuff.
Right, and just to give you some concrete details here, right now the players make approximately 56%,
57, I think.
57% of the revenue, and the owners want to take that down to 50. They're sticking firm to that, and the players are like considering offering 53 or something like that. So if you're focused only on the millionaire players being the problem, one could say, what the hell are billionaires arguing 50-50 with respect to Dwayne Wade and LeBron James? You guys sit on your ass. These guys are geniuses on the court. But it's all a matter of perspective and good eye, how you can see, even on the news coverage of sports, labor, you can see differences in the perspective. Caleb,
I
did
think
you
this
say?
seems to serve two purposes for Fox to spread a story like that. I guess the first one would be that you blame, like you said, you blame the labor instead of the corporation. And the second is it distracts people by focusing on the wrong millionaire elitists. It's like, these are the rich snobs you should be angry at, not the corporate criminals who are running the News Corp.
Yeah, exactly. Behind you first. I'll get to
Even though like Fox and CNN, like they have their like small differences, I think their core ideas and like what they represent are the same. Like I didn't try to distract people by like they throw jabs at each other and all this stuff, but I don't hear either sides calling out the Federal Reserve or like the restriction of like how our rights are getting smaller and smaller every day, and they're both like pushing this propaganda that they're like terrorists everywhere trying to kill Americans, where
So there's some similarities as well.
I think they're similar to the core, like so similar that it's almost like an agenda. Like they just have like.
You don't
the
see
thing that's-
Fox as being different to the core?
Yeah, but I
These
think they're
others?
both just as crooked. Like it's just like
Well-
it's just like two options. Like if you don't like this BS, we can give you this. Like
Okay,
it,
so
it gives
here's
people like the illusion that there's they have an option in things, even though they really don't.
let me try to understand what you're saying. You seem to be acknowledging that they have different perspectives.
Yeah.
And one could argue that we can't say that anyone is better. We don't know the truth here. But we're acknowledging that they're different. Because like over here, you had kind of Fox focusing on the labor being the problem in the labor debate in the NBA, whereas CNN is going to have this more comprehensive approach. So I see differences in their perspective, and I think that's what the authors are trying to develop to a degree. not arguing that either one's better, but they are indeed different. Because Fox is going to be anti-union, whether it's unions in Wisconsin, collective bargaining in the public sector, NBA, you name it. They're going to be pretty much against the unions. And you can pretty much count on that. You know, you can count on these differences in perspective. In any case, one of the reasons for this part of the homework is to get you to be a little more aware that the channel that you turn on to find your news is going to have a particular slant, that you can be aware of it, or it can pass right over you, you cannot think about it. And the authors of our book want you to be more aware of this slant that you get into the news. Any other examples of differences in the coverage on network news? The shoe that is tied in with the environment. I don't see that working too well. It looks like a dirty shoe. Pepsi makes you beautiful. Oh yeah. So the authors of our text are quite concerned with this use of pseudo-reasoning and the slant that we get in the news. And particularly on cable TV and talk radio, they see a lot of pseudo-reasoning involved, and they want us to become more conscious of it and better able to distinguish pseudo-reasoning from real logic. And this will improve our ability to judge the logic of an argument. Al Franken he used to have a radio show, but now he's a senator. And for those of us who are a bit older, it's pretty wild because Al Franken was a member of Saturday Night Live way back in the 70s. Did you know that? He was a regular member and a writer for Saturday Night Live, and now he's a senator. Pretty wild. Now keep in mind that if there's a bunch of rhetoric involved in an argument, that does not give us a reason to reject it. An argument can be filled with rhetorical devices, rhetorical definitions, and even, fallacies. But there might be a value to the argument, and there might be a way in which it is valid. And so, in spite of all the rhetoric that gets tied up in an argument, that's no reason to reject it out of hand. That's a reason to be more skeptical. If an argument is filled with rhetoric, that's a reason to be more skeptical, but it's no reason to throw the argument out altogether. Now here's the Limbaugh fallacy. This is an argument from outrage, according to the authors of our text. And essentially, this is just somebody who gets really angry and then comes forward with a conclusion, something like the following. The press, the leftists, they're just upset. There are not enough deaths to get people outraged and protesting in the streets against the war. Can you believe these people? He's describing leftists as actually wanting more people to die in the Iraq war so that we can get more people protesting against it. And this isn't really an argument. This is just Rush Limbaugh, going off on leftists thinking they're such terrible people. And then at the end, he'll come forward with the conclusion we should oppose the leftist position on the war. Caleb?
That sounds a lot like this conservative article we're doing on blows against global warming. They're saying that basically environmentalists they hate people. They just hate humanity so much. They think that humanity should be wiped from the earth.
So that would be kind of almost ad hominem.
Right.
You're making an argument about environmentalists instead of answering the argument that environmental scientists are making. That would be another form of a fallacy. Very good, Caleb. So here, in the argument from anger, there's not really an argument. You're just providing an excuse for somebody to get angry about something, and you're slipping in a conclusion there. And that is often passed off as a form of an argument. This is quite popular, I would say. Scapegoating. Scapegoating is when you inflame anger and then blame a group or person for being the cause of the problem. And in fact, this reminds me of part of a movie. Let's see here. No, I'm not even.
Because the president feels there is no value to this kind of character debate. Arthur?
Robin, will the president ever respond to Senator Rumson's question
So
about
this is
being
a
member of
movie in the
American
mid-90s. Anybody see
Yes,
this
you
movie?
will.
The American
Good morning.
President.
It's all right. Please keep your seats. Good morning.
Michael Douglas plays the American president.
For the last couple of months, Senator Rumson has suggested that being president of this country was to a certain extent about character. And although I've not been willing to engage in his attacks on me, I've been here 3 years and 3 days. And I can tell you without hesitation, being president of this country is entirely about character. For the record, yes, I am a card-carrying member of the ACLU. But the more important question is, why aren't you, Bob? Now, this is an organization whose sole purpose is to defend the Bill of Rights. So it naturally begs the question, why would a senator, his party's most powerful spokesman, and a candidate for president choose to reject upholding the Constitution? Now, if you can answer that question, folks, then you're smarter than I am, because I didn't understand it until a few hours ago. America isn't easy. America is advanced citizenship. You've got to want it bad, because it's going to put up a fight. It's going to say, you want free speech? Let's see you acknowledge a man whose words make your blood boil, who's standing center stage and advocating at the top of his lungs that which you would spend a lifetime opposing at the top of yours. You want to claim this land's the land of the free? Then the symbol of your country cannot just be a flag. The symbol also has to be one of its citizens exercising his right to burn that flag in protest. Now show me that. Defend that. Celebrate that in your classrooms. Then you can stand up and sing about the land of the free. I've known Bob Rumson for years, and I've been operating under the assumption that the reason Bob devotes so much time and energy to shouting at the rain was that he simply didn't get it. Well, I was wrong. Bob's problem isn't that he doesn't get it. Bob's problem is that he can't sell it.
Bob, is it?
We have serious problems to solve, and we need serious people to solve them. And whatever your particular problem is, I promise you, Bob Rumson is not the least bit interested in solving it. He is interested in two things, and two things only: making you afraid of it and telling you who's to blame for it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how you win elections. You gather a group of middle-aged, middle-class, middle-income voters who remember with longing an easier time, and you talk to them about family and American values and character. And you wave an old photo of the president's girlfriend, and you scream about patriotism. You tell them she's to blame for their lot in life. You go on television, and you call her a whore. Sidney Ellen Wade has done nothing to you, Bob. She has done nothing but put herself through school, represent the interests of public school teachers, and lobby for the safety of our natural resources. You want a character to debate, Bob? you better stick with me, because Sidney Ellen Wade is way out of your league.
You get all sugary after that. Point here is that he was talking about scapegoating and how some politicians aren't really interested in fixing our problems. What they're interested in is getting elected. And the way you get elected is to get a bunch of people angry about a particular problem and then blame it all on you. It's your problem, and where you're from, and all your friends too. It's all their problem. Don't you agree? We ought to kick this guy out. Yeah, we'll all be better off if we blame it on this guy. So the way to get elected, according to Michael Douglas in this movie, is to scapegoat, is to inflame anger and then blame one group. For example, immigrants. Some people argue that that is what's happening in our country now, when we have a bunch of people struggling for jobs, rather than going to the owners of the means of production, the owners of the corporations. What the owners of the corporations are going to do is get us fighting amongst themselves and get us fighting about immigrants coming in and taking our jobs. And that could be a way to scapegoat, blame it on immigrants or blame it on some other group. Just blame it on somebody, and that way you can take that anger and shift it over toward these scapegoats. That's what scapegoating is. And George Wallace is a famous example. He was a segregationist. He believed that we should have separate, separate but equal. And he could get old Southern white boys to vote for just about anything by whooping them up, talking about civil rights workers and things like that, and scapegoating Martin Luther King and all those who were involved in the civil rights movement. So this is a popular form of fallacy, popular form of rhetoric, scapegoating. Particularly during elections, we need to watch out for it. Comment, question? Yes, sir.
It seems like there's always the media always tries to have an in-group, out-group effect. There's always some, foreign, minutes after World War II, onward.
Yep.
And it seems really unethical. But do you think George Wallace had anything to do with the murder of the 3 civil rights workers? What was it? Was it Mississippi?
I have no idea.
It was 3 northern civil rights workers, black and white, who were killed by backwoods pigs, some Podunk, southern town.
And I'm sure justice was not done about it. Not the first or the last. A lot of problems.
But it was 68 or 69, so it's interesting. This seems directly connected to that.
I was alive, but it was well before my time, kid. Well before my time. Now, another rhetorical technique used that causes all kinds of problems are what we call scare tactics. Scare tactics is using fear to scare people into accepting a claim, like we need to invade Iraq, for example. This was, many people argue, was one of the main devices used to get us into this war. And think about how much that cost us. Would we have a deficit right now if we didn't go into Iraq? Think about how much money was spent invading this country. And now they're cutting, school teachers, they're cutting policemen, they're cutting firemen. But when it comes to deficit spending in order to support a war in Iraq, there was no problem back then, none at all. What was used to get us into Iraq? Well, one of the common themes, one of the common lines, one of the lines that you heard from Condoleezza Rice, from the Vice President, from the President, the Press Secretary, they all use this line. All of them use the line in the specific words. When that happens, you know it's not an accident. When they use the same phrases, that means that they've workshopped this language and they all get together and they use it. One of the main components of the workshop language was this line, "We don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud." I remember that phrase coming out of the president's mouth, vice president, Condoleezza Rice, press secretary, on down the line. We don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud. That's a mushroom cloud, an atomic bomb going off.
Or they could have said, we don't need evidence to have a preemptive war.
That would not be as effective.
But it would be the same meaning.
Correct, I see your point. And that's why they dress it up this way. They dress it up this way so people who aren't paying attention will not see that the argument is being made. Because we can say that about just about anybody. Because we didn't know that Iraq had nuclear weapons. And so you're right, Caitlin, if you go down that road, you know, are we going to let those Hawaiians, are we going to let it go to a, you know, you start making these claims about any group and you can scare people into accepting the idea that we should invade their country. So this is problematic when we use scare tactics like this. In fact, the documentary by Michael Moore, Fahrenheit 9/11, essentially makes the point that the administration has become a scare tactic factory, and they keep finding ways to scare you so that they can pass the Patriot Act, they can take away more of our civil liberties and justify it by all of these scare tactics. So it's a real device that has come to be used over and over and over again, the scare tactics. Looks like we're out of time. We'll pick it up again on Thursday.